I never thought that marrying Daniel Morgan would be the beginning of my death. They said he needed saving, that his life was hanging by a thread, and only someone with my gift, someone cursed, they whispered, could save him. I had what my grandmother called the second sight, the ability to see what others couldn't, to sense the evil that lingers where light can't reach. When the Morgan family came to my door, it wasn't to beg, it was to offer a contract. Marry him, heal him, and then what? Be tossed aside like some exorcist for hire, except I was foolish enough to believe I'd be loved. I used every ounce of energy I had to fight off the thing that clung to him, that coiled around his soul like smoke and shadows. I gave him back his life, but in return, he gave me a slow, rotting death. It started small, cold shoulders, silence, indifference, but then came the accusations, the gaslighting. And when his beloved Vanessa Blake, the white moonlight of his life, returned and whispered sweet poison into his ears, everything spiraled. She told him I'd cursed him, used dark magic to force the marriage. She told him that if I hadn't interfered, they would have never been separated, and none of the misfortune, the illness, the accidents would be happened. I tried to explain, but the man I had once saved was no longer the same. His eyes, once shadowed by death, now gleamed with hatred. I was pregnant when he ordered them to bury me alive. He didn't even blink. The last thing I heard as the coffin lid slammed shut was Vanessa's laughter and Daniel's cold voice saying, "Let her be one with the darkness she worships." I screamed until my throat tore, clawed until my nails ripped off. But no one came. The air ran out. My baby stilled. And I died abandoned, betrayed, suffocating in terror and rage. But fate is strange. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my bedroom. It was morning. The Morgan family hadn't arrived yet. My fingers trembled as I touched my stomach flat, untouched by life or death. I sat up, heart pounding like a drum. The date on my phone confirmed it. I was reborn. The same timeline. The same people. The same lies about to unfold. But not this time. This time, I wouldn't be the martyr. I wouldn't be their tool. I wouldn't be the woman begging for love while death hovered at the edge of my bed. So when Mr. Henry Morgan came to propose the marriage that would bind me to Daniel, I smiled coldly and said, "No." His expression cracked. "Miss Carter, you were chosen. It's your fate to help my grandson." Fate? What a joke. I don't believe in fate. And I definitely don't believe in ghosts anymore, I replied, lying through my teeth. Of course, I still saw them, spirits lingering in the corners of rooms, whispers carried through cracks in the walls. But I wasn't about to be pulled into that hell again. I rejected the proposal. I rejected the contract. I rejected Daniel Morgan and every string tied to the life I once sacrificed. But here's the thing about power. Once you've tasted it, people don't let go. Not when they're desperate. Daniel's condition worsened. His nightmares returned. He'd scream into the night, clawing at walls, muttering about her and the shadows. Vanessa, ever so manipulative, told the press he was just tired from work. But those close to him knew better. And so, they came again. Not just the Morgans, Vanessa came too, arm in arm with Reverend Elijah Brooks, a self-proclaimed spiritual healer. I recognized him instantly. In my past life, he was the one who tied me down and called me a demon, accusing me of bringing death wherever I walked. He used a peachwood blade to strike me across the back, claiming it was wholly cleansing. I still remember the sting. I still remember the mockery in his eyes. Now they were back to cleanse me again, in front of a full household. Elijah shouted that I was a walking curse. Vanessa clutched her crucifix necklace and pretended to cry. Daniel watched in silence as they tied my hands. I didn't resist. I didn't need to. I closed my eyes, remembering what came next. In the past, he had raised the blade, and I had bled. But this time the blade never touched me. Because right before it could fall, a blinding bolt of lightning struck the ground at Elijah's feet. In broad daylight. No clouds, no storm, just divine wrath aimed at a liar. He died instantly, eyes wide in disbelief. The air went cold. The crowd screamed and scattered. Daniel froze, his face drained of color. Vanessa shrieked and clung to him, shaking like a leaf. But I stood up, brushing off the dust from my white dress, and said calmly, "Looks like someone else was the real demon." No one dared stop me. No one dared speak. I walked out of that estate like I was walking a runway, each step powered by the ghosts of every betrayal. Mr. Morgan sent gift after gift to apologize: luxury jewelry, stock shares, even property titles. I accepted all of it. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to see Daniel's face when he realized he'd been replaced as heir. I knew the Morgans would panic without someone to heal Daniel, and I wanted them to spiral. I wanted him to see what it felt like to be powerless. They thought I'd be weak, emotional, sentimental. But rebirth has a way of burning those parts out of you. All that remained was clarity. Revenge wasn't enough. I wanted them to suffer not with death, but with ruin, humiliation, and regret. And this was just the beginning. After walking out of the Morgan estate like it was my personal runway, you'd think I'd disappear into a quiet life and move on, but no, I had a plan and I wasn't done. Not even close. Revenge wasn't a straight line, it was a slow burn, and I intended to make every second worth it. I used the stock shares and real estate Mr. Morgan gifted me as my leverage, funneled them into a private trust, and then leaked just enough information to make it clear to the business world that Daniel Morgan was no longer the family's golden boy. And that's when things started to crack. Daniel tried to act unbothered, keeping up his arrogant, clean-cut image, but the whispers wouldn't stop. Did you hear Emily Carter turned him down? She walked away with half the Morgan assets. She's the one they need, but she's playing them now. Exactly. I didn't need revenge through fire and fury, I wanted rot. I wanted decay. I wanted them to suffer the way I had, quietly, completely, and inescapably. But the real turning point came when Daniel brought Vanessa Blake to the house as his fiancée. She wore white to the family dinner like she thought she was the second coming of Grace Kelly, and had the audacity to toast Mr. Morgan, saying, "To new beginnings and old mistakes being forgiven." I nearly choked on my champagne because that line? That was stolen word for word from the apology letter I once wrote to Daniel in my past life, begging him to believe me when he thought I'd cursed him. Vanessa didn't just want him. She wanted to be me. But let's be clear, she didn't have the spine, the scars, or the fire to play that role. So I let her perform. I even sent a congratulatory gift, a wedding dress-shaped candle that melted into blood-red wax. The tabloids loved it. Vanessa hated it. Daniel, he didn't say a word. Not at first. But I knew he felt it. I knew he watched. Every social post, every charity gala I appeared at, every business move I made, it reached him. And like clockwork, the nightmares returned. At first, I didn't care. But then I heard the whisper she was getting sick again. Sicker than before. Violent sleepwalking. Shattered mirrors. Hearing voices. And just like that, the Morgan family came crawling again, this time not with contracts, but with desperation. I invited Mr. Morgan to my apartment not to help, but to watch him squirm. He begged. Actually begged. Said Daniel might not survive the month. Said their new spiritual advisors were afraid. Said Vanessa cried herself to sleep. Boo-hoo. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "If he dies, maybe he'll understand what being buried alive feels like." He turned pale. But I wasn't done. I added, "You think karma's done with him? That was just interest. The real payment hasn't even started." And then, like the devil's cue in a drama, Daniel himself showed up. He was thinner, paler. The confident spark in his eyes was gone. He looked like a man haunted because he was. Literally. The thing inside him, the one I'd fought to suppress in my past life, was backhand without me. It was winning. He dropped to his knees, right there on my marble floor, and whispered my name like a prayer, like a plea. "Emily, please." I stared down at him like he was an insect I'd stepped on and forgotten. "You once told me to rot in the dark, Daniel. Don't be mad it listened." But then he pulled something out, a photo. Of me. From the day I died. Dirt-streaked, eyes wide, pregnant. My lungs caught fire. "Where did you get that?" I hissed, my voice breaking despite myself. "I see it every night," he said, trembling. "You clawing. Screaming. You died cursing me." Damn right I did. I snatched the photo, hand shaking but didn't let it show. Instead, I reached for a bowl of water, chanted a quiet phrase my grandmother taught me, and forced him to look into it. His reflection shimmered then distorted. For a brief moment, we both saw it, a twisted, snarling face superimposed on his own, eyes black as night, teeth too many, whispering curses. He screamed and fell backward, shattering the bowl. That, I said coldly, is your soul now. Congratulations. You let it in. He sobbed. Actually sobbed. Emily, I was wrong. I was blind. To want to make it right. Marry me again. Let me fix this. I laughed. A short, sharp, bitter laugh that made his face crumple. You buried me alive, and now you want a second chance? I leaned down, my voice icy calm. If I marry you again, it'll be to finish the job in your ghost. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. The presence around him swirled tighter, angrier. You should leave, I warned. It doesn't like desperation. He ran. Literally fled. Mr. Morgan just stood there, shell-shocked, as if realizing for the first time that maybe, just maybe, the granddaughter-in-law he discarded was never the villain. After they left, I collapsed onto the couch, tears burning behind my eyes. Not because I felt pity, but because for a split second, I remembered the girl I used to be. The one who loved Daniel. The one who thought saving someone meant they'd save you back. That girl died in a coffin. I was someone else now. Someone stronger. Someone terrifying. And the world was about to learn that the woman they tried to bury was already roots deep in their downfall. What they called a curse, I now wore like a crown. And soon, I'd make them bow to it. After Daniel fled my apartment like a haunted shell of the man he once pretended to be, I knew the cracks were turning into full-blown fractures, and the Morgans had lost control of their carefully curated image of power. But I wasn't about to let it stop there. If hell had a VIP list, I was going to make sure every single one of them had a front row seat. The media started whispering when Morgan Corporation's stock price dipped for the first time in 5 years, but I knew exactly why it was happening. The energy around that family was completely off balance, and for once, it wasn't because of me. I'd already exorcised them from my life. They, however, couldn't shake me. Vanessa Blake tried to do damage control by posting photos of her and Daniel in matching designer outfits, captioned with lines like, "Love wins" and "Healing takes time," but people weren't buying it anymore. One comment under her latest post said, "Girl, he looks like he hasn't slept since the Civil War," and honestly, it made my day. But the best part? Daniel started to see me everywhere, literally. I got word through a mutual connection that he was having hallucinations of me standing at the edge of his bed, bleeding, eyes wide, whispering his name. At first, I thought it was guilt. Then I realized it was him. The thing. The same entity I once battled with everything I had. It was using my image now, tormenting him with the very version of me he killed. And honestly, that was poetic justice. Meanwhile, Vanessa spiraled. She accused him of cheating with my ghost. You really can't make this up. She stormed into one of his board meetings and screamed that he needed an exorcism, not a therapist. It was the beginning of the end for their perfect couple image. I stayed silent, of course. Didn't post, didn't react, just let the flames catch. And then one morning, I received a letter. Handwritten. Sealed with wax, old school and dramatic, just like the Morgans. Inside was a wedding invitation. Daniel and Vanessa were getting married at the same estate where I was once nearly killed. The audacity. The sick, twisted poetry of it all. So, I RSVP'd yes. In blood red ink. When I arrived at the venue, heads turned. I wore a black silk gown with a crimson collar, sharp heels, and a calm, collected smile. Vanessa's jaw dropped when she saw me. Daniel, he looked like he'd seen a ghost, which I guess in his mind, he had. Emily, he choked out. You came. Of course I did, I said sweetly. Wouldn't miss your funeral, I mean. Wedding for the world. The ceremony was tense. I sat in the front row. Every vow Vanessa recited sounded hollow. Daniel kept glancing my way like I was a ticking time bomb. And then, just as the priest said, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," I stood up. The room went silent. I'm not here to stop your wedding, I said, holding up my hands. You two deserve each other, delusion, betrayal, trauma, and all. and I sat back down. But just as they tried to finish, the chandelier above the altar flickered violently, then exploded in a shower of sparks. Screams echoed. Vanessa fainted. Daniel dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "Make it stop," he howled. But no one was doing anything. No one could. The energy in the room shifted like a storm brewing under the floorboards. The officiant ran. Guests followed. I remained seated.
Calm.
Collected. A woman watching her enemies collapse under the weight of their own evil. That night, photos of the haunted wedding trended online. Paranormal blogs had a field day. Morgan PR scrambled. Vanessa deleted her entire social media presence. And Daniel? He disappeared. Rumor had it he checked into a private facility under a false name. I didn't care. I had work to do. And by work, I meant wrapping up the last piece of the puzzle. Reverend Elijah Brooks. Oh yes, him. The fraud who once whipped me under the guise of exorcising demons. In my last life, he disappeared after that lightning strike, but I never found out why he came back, who sent him, or what the real agenda was. This time I did my homework, and I found something curious. He was on Vanessa's payroll.
She brought him in.
Paid him to cleanse me. The exorcism was staged. The accusations rehearsed. They never cared about spirits, they just wanted me dead. So I visited his last known address, a rundown chapel in a sleepy Louisiana town. The place reeked of rot and regret. I stepped into the main hall, and there he was, still alive, but barely. Paralyzed from the waist down, eyes wild with fear the moment he saw me. "Emily Carter," he rasped. "The cursed bride." "Funny," I said, circling him. "You once called me a demon. But I think I was just the warning." He begged for mercy. I offered him a choice. Confess everything he did to the media and the Morgans, or let what's attached to him finish the job. He chose the first option. Smart man. Days later, his video went viral. He confessed to fabricating the ritual, to working with Vanessa, to framing me and misleading the Morgans. It shattered any remaining credibility Vanessa had left. Her sponsorships dropped. Her public image burned. And Daniel?
He tried to reach out.
Sent flowers. Letters. Even a voicemail that ended with a broken whisper. "I still see you, Emily. Even when I close my eyes."
Good.
Let him. Because this wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. Of my name. My voice. My life. And now that I had dismantled the Morgans from the inside out, I was ready for the final chapter. Because I hadn't just risen from the dead, I had learned how to haunt without ever lifting a finger. And soon, I would show Daniel Morgan what true justice looked like. Not in death, but in the slow, irreversible collapse of everything he once valued. Starting with his soul. I never thought revenge would feel so quiet, like sipping tea on a stormy porch while watching someone else's house catch fire, but that's exactly what it felt like when the Morgan Corporation finally began to collapse. It started small. Vanessa's endorsements dried up, one by one, after Reverend Brooks's viral confession destroyed any credibility she had left, and sponsors don't like ghosts unless they're selling Halloween merch. Then came the business partners quietly backing out of deals, citing unforeseen instability. The Morgans, once considered untouchable royalty in Atlanta's corporate elite, were suddenly radioactive, and I didn't have to lift a single hand. But the true masterpiece? That was the boardroom betrayal. Olivia Morgan, Daniel's older sister, the one everyone always underestimated, stepped up like a queen in checkmate mode and announced at a shareholder meeting that she'd been granted full financial control by Mr. Morgan himself after Daniel's repeated absences and mental instability. The media had a field day. Morgan heiress takes the reins amid scandal, trended for 2 days straight. Daniel didn't even show up to contest it. He couldn't. He was holed up somewhere, likely watching his empire unravel through security footage and glass walls. I heard from a very reliable source that he smashed a mirror the moment he saw Olivia signing the documents. It shattered right as he screamed my name. Poetic, really? Meanwhile, Vanessa tried to sue Reverend Brooks for defamation, but it backfired spectacularly when he countersued and released text message screenshots of her ordering him to ruin the little witch Emily Carter before she poisons the Morgan legacy. I posted one of those screenshots with a single caption: "Karma delivers receipts." It hit 200,000 likes in under 6 hours. Olivia called me that night. We'd never really spoken before. She always kept her distance during my time as the Morgan's sacrificial lamb, but now she sounded almost impressed. "Emily," she said smoothly, "if you ever want a seat on the board, I think we'd make a hell of a team." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I was enjoying this version of Lithia life, where I wasn't begging for scraps or pretending not to see the spirits that still followed me like shadows. Speaking of spirits, Daniels wasn't doing well. Not his actual ghost was still alive, unfortunately, but his soul? That thing was unraveling. I'd heard whispers from caretakers. Nightmares so vivid they had to sedate him. Sometimes he'd wake up screaming my name. Other times, he'd sit in the dark for hours, talking to a mirror as if I were inside it. And the kicker? He started carving my initials into his skin. EM, over and over, like a broken record with a razor. I'd be lying if I said it didn't shake me, just a little. Not out of pity, but out of the eerie realization that the thing haunting him wasn't just supernatural. It was his own guilt feeding the darkness. In my past life, I begged him to believe me. I begged for my life. Now I was silent. And in that silence, he finally started to hear the echoes of everything he ignored. Vanessa left him, of course. Packed her designer bags and ran after a public breakdown where she threw a glass of wine at a journalist for asking if she was still engaged to the possessed Morgan heir. Her last social post was a blurry quote over a sunset photo. "Sometimes love is letting go." I commented with a waving emoji. It became the top-liked reply. But this story wasn't about her anymore. Or even Daniel, not really. It was about me, Emily Carter, reclaiming every piece of myself that had been chipped away, burned, buried, and ignored. And as I stood in front of the mirror one night, candles flickering, eyes closed as I whispered the names of every person who had hurt me, I felt it, the final chord snapping. The tie between me and Daniel was breaking. Not out of vengeance, but out of freedom. I had no more need for his guilt, his pain, or his face. He was no longer my story. But fate wasn't done with him yet. A week later, I got a call. Not from him, from his doctor. Apparently, Daniel had requested to see me. Said he had something important to say. I almost hung up. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe the urge to see the ending for myself, made me say yes. I arrived at the private facility with zero expectations. The place was quiet, too quiet, like the air had been drained from the walls. Daniel was in a white hospital gown, sitting in a chair by the window, face gaunt, hands trembling. When he looked at me, I saw a man who had died in every way except physically. "Emily," he said softly, as if my name burned his mouth. "You're real." "I always was," I said coldly. "You just chose not to see it." He tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. His eyes welled with tears. "I see her," he whispered. "The other you. Every night. She cries. She begs. She curses me. I deserve it. But you're different. You're light. That girl you see," I said quietly, "is the version of me you buried. She never left you. She's what your soul owes." He nodded slowly. "Then I want to repay it. All of it." I tilted my head. "And how exactly will you do that?" He pulled out a document. A confession. Everything from the lies Vanessa fed him, to the staged exorcism, to ordering my burial. He wanted to release it. Publicly. "Why now?" I asked. He looked away. "Because dying with this isn't enough. I want people to know who I really was, and who you really are." I didn't say thank you. I didn't cry. I just took the document and walked out without a word. Outside, the sun was rising. Warm. Bright. And for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I wasn't weighed down by ghosts. I was reborn. Not through magic, but through survival. And the girl they tried to kill? She was now a woman the world couldn't look away from. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because justice isn't just personnel, it's legacy. And the world was about to learn what kind of legacy I planned to leave behind. I didn't rush to release the confession Daniel gave. May waited, not out of hesitation, but because timing is everything, and I wanted the truth to land like a thunderclap, not a whimper. While the media speculated about his mental collapse and the sudden silence from the Morgan estate, I went quiet too, posting nothing, disappearing from public view, letting the tension build until people couldn't scroll without seeing my name in whispered headlines or blind items. And then in the anniversary of the day I had once been buried alive, I uploaded a single video. No makeup, no edits, no filters.
Just me.
Sitting in front of a black backdrop, holding Daniel's signed confession in one hand and a faded photo of myself in the other, the one taken the night I died, the one Daniel had seen in his nightmares.
I spoke slowly, calmly.
I didn't dramatize, didn't cry. I told the truth the way a storm breaks a drought, inevitable and devastating. I told them about the forced marriage, the spiritual manipulation, the accusations of witchcraft, the betrayal, the fake exorcism, the burial while I was still alive and pregnant. I let the camera capture every word, every breath, every unflinching stare. And then I ended it with one sentence. If you believe in justice, don't let the next Emily be silenced. Within hours, the internet exploded. Justice for Emily trended globally. Influencers, news outlets, even celebrities reposted the video with comments like, "This is the most powerful thing I've ever watched," and "How did we let this happen?" Survivors of abuse, cult trauma, spiritual gaslighting, they all flooded my inbox with stories of their own, and suddenly, I wasn't just a victim or a ghost from Daniel Morgan's past. I was a symbol, a spark, a mirror reflecting everything the world tried to hide. Olivia called me again. Her voice was raw, with something that sounded like respect. "Emily," she said, "they want a formal investigation into Morgan Corporation. The board is panicking."
Good.
Let them. Let them sweat like I did inside that coffin. Let them wonder which secret would surface next. Daniel's confession became public record. I released the full document to multiple independent journalists, making sure no single outlet could bury it. Vanessa's lawyers tried to issue a cease and desist, but it backfired. Screenshots of her texts with Reverend Brooks went viral again, this time paired with audio clips of her mocking my ghost show while sipping champagne. Her career didn't just collapse, it evaporated. No brand wanted to touch her. No PR firm could save her. She deactivated every account and, last I heard, fled the country to focus on healing.
Cute.
Meanwhile, Daniel issued one last statement, handwritten, shaky, and painfully human. He admitted everything. He apologized publicly. Said he deserved whatever judgment the world handed him. He didn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding. And weirdly, that made it hit harder. The world can be brutal, but when a man strips himself bare and says, "I was the villain, I destroyed the only person who loved me," people pay attention. I didn't respond to his statement directly, but I did post one teen-off photo of me standing by a lake at sunset, wearing white, not as a bride, but as a survivor. The caption read, "Some ghosts are just girls who refuse to stay silent." It got over 1 million shares in a day. Invitations came pouring in, talk shows, documentaries, book deals, speaking tours. I declined most of them. I wasn't interested in monetizing my trauma. I only agreed to the documentary because I wanted control over the story. I hired a female director, made sure every crew member was vetted, and told them from the start, this isn't about a man who lost his mind. It's about a woman who was buried and chose to rise. The premiere shattered streaming records.
People cried.
People raged. People finally saw the kind of horror you can't dress up in designer suits and smiles. And with that visibility came something I hadn't expected: power. Not the kind that Daniel once wielded with money and fear, but the kind that settles in your bones when you know your voice changes things. Victims reached out. Activists offered alliances. Charities asked me to join their boards. Olivia, surprisingly, offered me a permanent role in rebuilding the Morgan brand, one with full creative control and veto power over everything. I didn't give her an answer.
Not yet.
Because in the middle of all the chaos, one thing became clear. I didn't want to just react anymore. I wanted to create. To rebuild. To use the ashes of my past like cement for something no one could burn down again. But even as the world embraced me, the shadows never left. I still saw them. Still felt the presence hovering behind mirrors, still sensed the old energy lingering around Daniel like a curse that refused to be lifted. And maybe, deep down, I didn't want it lifted. Maybe he needed to live with it. Maybe that was the only true justice. Or maybe the universe wasn't done with either of us yet. Because the night before my first official public appearance, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a single item. The wedding ring Daniel had once placed on my finger in our first life, when everything was still a lie wrapped in silver. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it on the mantel beside the urn of herbs I'd used during my resurrection ritual. Symbolic? Maybe. Final?
Not yet.
Because even with everything that had happened, I knew the ending hadn't arrived. Not for me. Not for him. Not for the ghosts still tethered to both our names. And I had this feeling, an unshakable instinct that before this was over, I'd have to return to where it all started. The Morgan estate. The house where I died. The place where silence once screamed louder than words. And this time, I wouldn't come back as the girl desperate to be loved. I'd return as the woman they couldn't destroy. The one who walks with shadows. And commands them. I didn't go back to the Morgan estate because I missed anything there. I went because something in me whispered that a story only ends where it began, and mine had never really ended at all, just unraveled and rewoven until it became something else entirely. The mansion stood just as I remembered it, cold, stately, empty of warmth no matter how much gold they stacked in its corners. But the energy was different now, quiet, hollow, and old, like the echo of a scream that never got answered. I walked through the grand front doors like I belonged there, like I'd never been dragged across those marble floors or screamed for my life, while Daniel watched with dead eyes. This time, I walked like I was made of something heavier than flesh. Olivia greeted me with a kind of calm only women who've survived hell can wear, like armor. "He's upstairs," she said simply. "He hasn't spoken in days." But when I told him you might come, he moved to the room with the skylight. He used to hate sunlight, remember? I nodded. I didn't remember much from my time here, but I remembered that. He always said the light gave him headaches. I used to think it was a medical thing. Now I know it was just the truth trying to reach him. The second floor creaked as I climbed, my heels striking echoes into the silence, each step a drumbeat in the funeral march of whatever was left between us. The door was open. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, thinner than I'd ever seen him, skin translucent under the harshness of mourning. The moment I crossed the threshold, he looked up, and for the first time, I didn't see a man who had destroyed. May saw a man who had destroyed himself. "Emily," he rasped, like my name still had the power to summon the last flicker of who he used to be. I didn't speak. I just stood there, letting him sit in his grief, the guilt, the silence. "I knew you'd come," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not for you," I said calmly, "for me. To bury the past, not dig it back up." He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. "I see her every day, you know. The version of you I left behind. She never stops crying. I try to talk to her, to ask for forgiveness, but she never says a word. I think she hates me." I stepped further into the room, stopping just before the sunlight hit the floor. "She doesn't hate you," I replied. "She pities you. That's worse." He let out a strangled sound, half sob, half laugh. "I thought if I confessed, if I gave the truth to the world, it would free me. But it didn't. Because redemption isn't something you get," I said softly. "It's something you earn, and sometimes you never do." He stood, slowly, wobbling like his body didn't quite believe it could still move. "Then what am I supposed to do, Emily? How do I end this?" And that was the question, wasn't it? The one that had followed us through 2 lifetimes, a grave, a rebirth, and a storm of public reckoning. I looked him in the eye, the man who once called me a curse, who ordered my death and thought love meant control, and I said the one thing I never imagined I'd be able to say with clarity. "You don't end it." "I do." Then I reached into my coat and pulled out a small pouch, dried herbs, black salt, a slice of obsidian. My grandmother's final charm. The one meant not to destroy, but to sever. "This is a release ritual," I explained. "It doesn't cleanse your soul, it just untangles it from mine. You'll still have to live with your demons. But they won't be mine anymore." He didn't resist. He just nodded and dropped to his knees as I began the chant, my voice low and steady as the air around us shifted, the light through the skylight bending, shimmering like water. The moment I said his full name, Daniel Weston Morgan, the shadows shrieked. Not out loud, but inside my bones. And then, silence. Real silence. Not absence.
Peace.
He collapsed, not unconscious, just empty. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, he whispered, "Thank you for letting me suffer." I paused. "That wasn't my gift, Daniel. That was your own doing." I just stepped out of the way. I didn't look back. I walked out of that room, that house, that era of my life like stepping through a mirror that finally showed me who I was. Not the cursed bride, not the haunted widow, not the broken woman screaming under 6 feet of soil. I was Emily Carter. Survivor. Truth teller.
Storm.
The next morning, headlines declared Daniel Morgan had officially stepped down from all positions, citing long-term psychological recovery. Olivia was named CEO. She offered me a permanent chair on the board again. I still didn't answer. I didn't need to. The world had shifted, and I had already moved beyond it. My last post was a photo of the sea.
Vast. Wild.
Borderless. The caption read, "The dead don't haunt the living. The truth does." And then I logged off. Maybe for good. I still see shadows sometimes. Still feel the wind change when someone speaks my name with venom. But I'm not afraid of spirits anymore. I command them. And every time I stand in front of a crowd or speak for women who still have dirt under their fingernails and silence in their throats, I remember that no one buried me. They just planted the wrong seed. And I grew into something they could never uproot. This is my ending. And my beginning.